This week, we have two interviews. First one will be with Brendan O'Connor, who is the CTO at ServiceNow, one of our fine sponsors. John Moran joins us in studio, who's a Patriots fan like myself, so you can hate us both pretty equally, which is great. John's the senior product manager at DF Labs, and you've got like a demo or something. John just came down to drink bourbon and have cigars, and what a better place to do that. So I don't know what he's going to talk about. We're going to sit here and drink bourbon and have cigars because that's how we roll. In the enterprise news, Red Hat makes an interesting acquisition. AWS and Squirrel have some news as well, as that was an acquisition. The Twistlock is in the news, as well as Microsoft and Cisco. I guess it's like big security company day here on the show, and Beyond Trust, all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. The teleprompter now has artificial intelligence, Doug, and updates itself. It's awesome. This week, and talk about them as it relates to enterprise security. You're gonna do great. we're gonna
I think that people think that you and I talk like every day at night. You know, It's like, hey, what are you doing? It's kind of a bit of an exhausting week, and I think that we noticed that a little bit in the stories for this week as well.
Are you worried about PCI compliance? Does your development team understand or care about security? Are you ready to face a breach of your customer sensitive data? See the worst that can happen before it does. Black Hills Information Security can help you help management see the future. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com to find out how a web application penetration test can mitigate the risk before you go live. Minerva Labs stops malware that traditional antivirus solutions cannot block. Minerva works with your existing anti-malware tools to stop evasive threats by deceiving them into a dormant state, dramatically increasing your rate of prevention. Minerva's solution does not require ongoing care and feeding and will not get in the way of business users. With Minerva, adversaries have to pick their poison, implement evasive tactics and get caught by Minerva, or don't employ evasion and get stopped by AV. To learn more and request a demo, visit minerva-labs.com today. Welcome, everyone, to episode 78 of Enterprise Security Weekly. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, wearing my tactical turtleneck just for Mr. John Strand, who is on the lines via Skype. John, welcome to the program.
I'm wearing the tactical fleece as well, Paul. This is
Excellent.
A fully, completely, and utterly tactical show.
John and I are big fans of Archer. I haven't watched it recently, though. Have you, John?
I don't think they've come out with any new episodes since he was in Dreamland, which was a horrible season.
Yeah, I think
bad.
They ran out of their creative juices, so to speak. So we've got a couple of interviews lined up for today. Make sure you check out our on-demand webcast series. In fact, John Strand and I did one on penetration testing, the state of penetration testing, in fact. securityweekly.com/on-demand. You can hear John and I talk about pen testing as well as lots of other on-demand webcasts from our fine sponsors. Now, in here with me in studio is John Moran from DF Labs. John, welcome.
Thank you.
And we got cigars and bourbon. Like, we should hang out more. This is great.
I came down for the cigars and the bourbon, and
Excellent.
If some security breaks out, I'm fine with that.
There you go. Well, it's nice to have you here in studio. I want to introduce our guest for our sponsor interview for today. Brendan O'Connor is the CTO at ServiceNow. Brendan, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
So, Brendan,
it's only
I guess
10 o'clock in San Francisco. No bourbon for me yet.
There you go. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, okay? Or 12 o'clock, I guess, depending on your perspective on things. So, Brendan, give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you came to be the CTO at ServiceNow.
Sure. I've been a lifelong practitioner. I started in the late 90s in telecommunications, working on embedded systems and really getting hands-on with facility-based electronics. Now we'd call it IoT. 15, 20 years ago, we didn't call it IoT. We called it embedded systems. But great experience, great way to start out in the industry. Did a stint in financial services and banking. The online banking revolution was happening early 2000s, money moving onto the web, great thing to be a part of, and securing online banking platforms and doing what I can. And then in 2007, I joined Salesforce as the first hire on the product security team. Spent almost a decade there, '07 to 2017. In my final years there, I was the CISO. And then after taking a break, I decided I wanted to build some security products. So I joined ServiceNow about 6 months ago, and really excited to be on the team building security operations.
Well, and that's interesting, and I think largely for our audience who's probably familiar with ServiceNow, we didn't necessarily, well, I mean, we're, covering the security industry on a daily basis here on Security Weekly, but we didn't necessarily always think of ServiceNow as a security company. When did that transition start, and what kinds of problems are you trying to solve for your clients security related?
Well, ServiceNow started as an IT systems management company, and it is the industry leader in ITSM in the cloud. Security here started about a year and a half ago. So I didn't start the practice. I was lucky enough to join the team once they got rolling. But the vision is there's so much that security needs to do with IT. There's usually some tension between InfoSec and IT in a company, but also their partners. And things like vulnerability management, security operations, trivial tasks like resetting compromised credentials. You're touching IT systems, and you need IT partnership. So whether it's patching the fleet, rolling compromised creds, doing vuln scanning, IT is a partner and a customer of InfoSec. And with ServiceNow, the vision is putting those two together and helping them work better and moving work throughout the enterprise.
Yeah, it's interesting, obviously having a background in vulnerability management, I saw that firsthand, certainly. And a lot of clients would come to me and say, well, hey, I'm running all these vulnerability scans and we're trying to manage all of these vulnerabilities. I'm like, that's great. I'm like, what's your process for fixing those vulnerabilities? And like, oh, no, we just generate a report. So how do you help people with the vulnerability management problem? Because obviously, like you said, an IT person has to go touch a system or do something in order to remediate that vulnerability, typically.
Well, I think anyone in InfoSec that's paying attention knows that patching is still an issue. It's been, 18 years since Windows Update came out. I don't think we have a technology problem of being able to download patches. We can download bits and push those bits out to the fleet. That's not necessarily the hard part. And we have great security tools that help us diagnose the problem. We have frameworks like CVE that help us, risk rank and understand how bad things are. Where things break down is actually getting all the patches that are needed and getting the critical vulnerabilities to key systems actually deployed. So I think it's a visibility problem and it's an execution problem. And when you see some of the bugs that are taking down large companies and causing huge breaches, these are 30, 60, 90 days in some cases. These patches have been available, and the vuln or the exploit is common knowledge on the web. People aren't getting popped by O-Day. They're getting popped by 60-day, and they're getting popped by 90-day. It's not that they don't care, they're not trying, but I think we don't have the right way to move that work throughout the organization and the way to make sure that all those key systems actually are patched and they're in the state we expect them to be.
Well, and even with the patches, you talk about how organizations are actually getting compromised. Organizations are mainly getting compromised still to this day through spear phishing. And I think that leads to a completely different problem, is the ability to actually detect and respond effectively. And it seems like that, for me personally, that seems to be one of the larger issues, not patching. I mean, we've always had patching as an issue, just like you said. It's always been around. We've got tools to automate that. But as soon as an organization thinks they're compromised, that's whenever they start running around with their hands up in the air, screaming that everything's on fire, and they don't really have a good plan or even the technical capabilities to react.
Yeah, I think you're right on. The time to go shopping for a fire extinguisher is not when your kitchen's on fire. And I think that a lot of companies, that's their strategy, either intentionally or not. And when you look at, phishing, as you mentioned, Google released a report at the end of last year on phishing on Gmail. And they found with a lot of the recent breaches and dumps, like if you look on Have I Been Pwned, they found 6.9% of Gmail users had unrotated compromised passwords. So these are creds that were weak or clear text popped from other breaches that will get you into someone's Gmail account. So things like spear phishing, things like account takeover, things like reused credentials, that stuff still works. And the ability for InfoSec teams to look at which of my users have been popped, and can I reach into AD, can I reach into Okta, or whatever my directory service is, and force rotate all those credentials? And can I be, have some level of assurance that I did it everywhere? It's a tough job.
And you know what sucks about that is whenever Google does that, it's called research. Like if we were doing it, it'd be called a felony. So.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, John.
The distinction is one of permission.
So, Brendan, help me understand the ServiceNow solution. It sounds like you help more on the workflow side and not so much on the actual like management of the patches or passwords or credentials. Is that largely done through integrations, or like help me understand, if I have ServiceNow today, where can I benefit from the security solutions?
Sure, we help in a couple of areas. Vulnerability management, like I mentioned, we integrate with Rapid7, with Qualys, with Nessus Tenable. All great products. We're not trying to reinvent those products, but each one of those, when it spits out a vulnerability report, what does security do with that? And I think in most cases, they take a spreadsheet that they prioritize and they email it over to IT. It doesn't have business context. It doesn't assign it to the actual functional owners that need to go do the work, and it doesn't have that business context. If you have RCE on a box that shows everyone what's for lunch in the cafeteria that day, that's probably not as big of a risk as, say, local privilege escalation on a shared multi-tenant system that your customers use. So you need the business context of what these boxes are doing, what services they provide, to actually look at what's the risk to my business, what's the risk to my customers, and what are the most important things that I need to get done first. ServiceNow helps with that.
So it's interesting, Brendan, and it's somewhat controversial, sure, as I used to work for Tenable, but I think one of the things that the three big players in vulnerability management struggled with was what we label as like the reporting problem. But really, it was the, what do I do with these results and how do I build a workflow? And the organizations that I've seen that have been successful with that have typically built their own systems. Now, that also what emerged, I think, from that disconnect between finding the vulnerabilities and putting a workflow in place to fix them, all these other vendors emerged that allowed you to prioritize that remediation and then bring it to your teams to go do it with some context. So how does ServiceNow differentiate themselves from a lot of those other vendors in that space, and from maybe some internal solutions as well?
Well, I think a lot of companies have had to build their own because there hasn't been a technology platform that's going to help them, that's going to enable them to use orchestration or to work with IT and work across the business and have that enterprise vulnerability visibility into what's really important to the business. Anyone who's been in InfoSec knows that you can convince IT, hey, we need to patch the system. It's a good thing. It's an important thing to do. But they're also accountable to the business owner. There's someone in the business that may need that system up because it's end of quarter, or there may be a key job that's running and they can't take it down during that maintenance window this week. So it's a problem of context, and it's a problem of business risk, and it's a problem of prioritization. ServiceNow can help take in all that information, help you prioritize it, get the tickets assigned, and then move that work throughout the business. When IT says, hey, this system's patched, wouldn't it be great if you could automatically trigger a rescan, whether it's Nessus or Qualys, Rapid7, system comes out, scans it, marks that ticket closed in your security operations dashboard. Patch completed, here's how long it took, patch confirmed, move on to the next one. I think a lot of time is lost going back and forth, emailing, spreadsheets, or things just getting lost in the shuffle. I don't think people intentionally don't patch. I think there's just too much to do.
Does ServiceNow help with the IT asset management problem, right? And that's always a problem that I associate with vulnerability management is I can scan what I know about, but there's so much stuff that I don't know about. And even if that's a small percentage, there seems to be always this small percentage that I just don't know about. Were you able to combine some asset management and inventory management with that vulnerability management piece, which also plays into other security solutions as well?
Often the system of record for companies' IT departments. We have the CMDB. You know what the systems are, what software they're running, what they do, who they're assigned to. But I've also found that in many enterprises, whoever owns the scanner, which is usually security, that's also a source of truth. There's a lot of times when IT has to true up what security is seeing and saying, hey, what is that host? What's it doing over there? Or we didn't know what this was. It hasn't connected to the VPN in a long time. Or maybe you've got a stale DNS record and it's, you don't quite know what that box is or what it's doing. So what ServiceNow can also do is take that data you're getting from your vuln scanners and feed that into IT. It makes the IT system and the CMDB better. And it also leverages that investment of being the IT system of record in owning that CMDB and making your vuln scanning more intelligent, and most importantly, putting context around the vulns. It's not just a CVE and IP address. It's what this system does, what data is on it, what's its asset criticality, what's its maintenance window, who's the system owner. All of that helps you get the work done. And then orchestration, intelligent automation actually does the work.
Now, you've said a phrase that I think scares a lot of us today in enterprise security, and that's automation. What can you tell us, Brendan, about how automation and orchestration is playing, how it's playing a role in security today?
Yeah, it is a hot button issue, and I think that most people view automation as binary. And I don't view it as binary. I view it as a gradient. You know, you don't have to be non-automated, completely manual, or fully automated. Automation helps you get work done. When I look at a common task that my team had to do previously when I was a CISO, we got phishing reports all the time. And anyone who's responded to phishing can probably run through this playbook with me. You're going to look at the domain. What domain did it come from? Does it have a file attachment? Does it have links in it? All right, I'm going to go grab that file attachment, take a hash, look at it and see if it's a known IOC, maybe put it in a malware sandbox and detonate it, check with VirusTotal. I'm going to look at that domain or that link. I'm going to check with VirusTotal or my Palo Alto or whatever products I'm using, my threat intel feeds. I've got all this signal surrounding me that I'm paying for, all these great security products, and I'm going to go ping all of them and see, does someone already have the answer? Is this known malware? Is this a known IOC? Is this a known phishing domain? And then I'm going to do something about it. Well, why should a human do that? The playbook exists. When a user reports a phishing email to you, why isn't your system automatically going out and querying all those things and giving the security analyst that context, saying, hey, this email just came in, it's known malware, here's the version, here's the variant, this domain is known bad, would you like to block? And letting a person decide, you know what, I want to block that domain. Or I want to go reach into Exchange and look at every other user that may have gotten this attachment so I can initiate response activity for them. I think humans are doing this now, or they're writing Python scripts or Ruby scripts or kind of helping to automate their own job, but there isn't a systematic process way to do it. And I think you start with the little things, the mundane stuff, the 5 and 10 minute tasks that you have to do multiple times a day, multiple times a week. And you can keep a person on the go button. You don't have to fully give the robots control of your network. You can start small, start slow, and it's a journey. As you get more confidence in the system, as you're saving more time, then you can actually spend more time on your day programming automation or thinking about harder problems that you can't automate. So automation is a journey. It's not binary.
You know what I love about that too, and I learned this when I was doing some performance tuning early on in my career, is that those short little tasks really matter at scale. And while it may not seem like a big deal to spend 5 or 10 minutes on something during your day, because it's only 5 or 10 minutes during your day. I think performance tuning was the same thing. Like, yeah, I could probably save like 1 or 2%, you know, with that process. But what you don't realize is, in the grand scheme of things, that process is running over and over and over again. To make it save you 5 or 10 minutes or save a few processor cycles ends up making a big deal when it comes to performance tuning or even, you know, automation and saving time in your day. And I think a lot of people don't realize a lot of the things that could be automated and how much that helps them. Because at the surface, it feels like I'm only saving 5 or 10 minutes, which may seem insignificant. But you multiply that out across a team that's doing that activity, you know, multiple times a day or even once a day. That's a huge time savings. Go ahead, Brendan.
It also has to do with breach response. So rotating one user's credential is a pretty easy task for a security professional and IT professional. Someone calls and said, hey, I fell for phishing or my device was lost or stolen, and you're going to go reach into AD or whatever your systems are and roll those creds. Any person can go do that. But if there's a breach announced and a bunch of creds are compromised and you've got 500 users, 1,000 users, all of their creds are compromised, and you have to go do that 2-minute task 500 times, that's when automation can go out and hit all 500 in minutes. They can do 1,000 credentials in minutes. It's when things are really bad, having that automation system that's, you know, tried and true and knows how to perform those tasks, it can do it in parallel and it can do it very quickly. You know, my analogy of going shopping for the fire extinguisher, if you find out you have your users compromised due to a cred dump, you don't want to start coding a script and testing it that day. Mm-hmm. You're going to look at it and say, man, this is what I'm doing today. I'm going to have to write a script, test it, and get these credentials rolled. But if you can click a button in an intelligent automation system that already is programmed to deal with the credential response flow, then you can do 500 users, 5 users. It's all the same to the robot.
Now, John, I want to turn it over to you because I know your team is still very successful in email phishing. Is it just that organizations haven't implemented the correct processes and automation and orchestration to combat that phishing? Or like, why is it still successful? Because I think Brendan has laid out a great plan for organizations to combat phishing attacks.
You're still ultimately going to have about 20% of the population that is going to click on links. I mean, that number roughly. Some organizations are a little bit lower, some organizations are a lot higher, but on average it's still about 20%. And if you can still have somebody that's willing to click a link, at that point it doesn't really matter. We can get creative in ways that we try to get around any of the protections, whether it's downloading an executable to that computer system or collecting credentials on that computer system, or trying to steal their two-factor authentication tokens that we can add in a new app for like Gmail. So there's a lot of creativity as far as what you can do after that point. You don't have to go down the exact same path every single time. And while trying to break into organizations via phishing is still very successful, we have to basically change our tactics quite often. It's much like AV bypass. What you do today is not going to work next week. So you're constantly coming up with new approaches. So I think it ultimately comes down to a user awareness problem, which I don't think is easily solved in many organizations, because organizations believe they do training once and then they're done. And then it's also a detection problem, because a lot of organizations are still doing a blacklisting approach to try to identify what is evil. And it's just going to be a mess for a long time. The only organizations that are very, very difficult to get into are the organizations that completely sandbox every single attachment. They're the organizations that maybe strip every single attachment, and the user has to somehow acknowledge or send something back and forth saying, yes, I acknowledge this is an organization or someone I want to communicate with, send me attachments. But it gets really kludgy and difficult for the end user. So I think it's basically email itself is a problem, but I think it's mainly a user awareness problem.
Well, and it sounds like targeted attacks are going to be successful depending upon the persistence of the attacker.
Well, and there's the big deal, right? Like that whole idea of a targeted attack, given enough time, a targeted attack is going to get in. The general kind of spray and pray type phishing attacks, I see those getting stopped more and more effectively all the time, but it's the targeted ones that are always going to be difficult.
Yeah, Brendan, sorry, do you have comments?
No, I completely agree with what you're saying, John. And I think when we make security controls so unusable that it's really hard for users to get their job done, they find a way to route around it. They'll find some way to work around it to get their job done. So I believe in usable security. And I also believe that, whether it's a user having a bad day and they do something stupid like clicking a phishing link or opening an attachment they shouldn't, or you have a sophisticated targeted attack, something's going to happen to your enterprise. An attacker is somehow going to get a foothold, whether it's getting a user cred or getting a foothold on a workstation. So crossing your fingers and hoping it won't happen to you isn't a good strategy. It's, do you have the ability to respond quickly and get them out of your network and make them go back to square one, ground zero, as quickly as possible in an automated fashion?
Yep, exactly.
But now, ServiceNow solutions also help with the incident response process. We've already established that ServiceNow contains information about the systems and assets and users within the organization. I would imagine that extends out to include automation and orchestration that supports that incident response. As John said, targeted attack, pretty much we're going to find a way to get in. I think reducing your time to detection is important, and that's a function of detection and also incident response. So how does ServiceNow help with that process?
Well, when I look at the tremendous wave of innovation we've seen in the areas of protection and detection in the past 10 years, it's amazing. Like next-gen firewalls, we have amazing tools on the endpoint. We have more visibility into our networks and our systems and our logs than any other time in InfoSec. The visibility that I have today is something I could only dream of 10 years ago. But we haven't really done a good job of innovating response. And I think that the way that people respond to incidents today is largely the same as the way they did it 10 years ago. So we have this huge investment in security tools and technologies and SIMs and all these products, threat intel feeds. How are we using it? We've got a ton of noise. We've got a ton of signal. ServiceNow can actually help you bring all that together in context. Why have a person manually sorting through logs or searching through logs or trying to correlate events across disparate systems? Let the robot do that for you. Let an automation system go hit Splunk. Let it go hit your threat intel feed. Let it go hit Virus Total. Look up all this information and present you with context so you can make a decision and choose a path on response. It also helps you automate the response workflow. We know what the assets are. How many times has a user called in and said, hey, my laptop was stolen, or I left my iPhone in the back of a BlackBerry or in the back of an Uber or a Lyft? that's something that's going to happen. Do you have the ability to look up what asset does he have? Go hit your mobile endpoint solution and reset or revoke the credentials to that device, roll the user's AD account. That's a common task, and it shouldn't take you 5-10 minutes to do it. It shouldn't take you an hour to do it. Let the automation system do that. It has context, and it has connections to all those systems. It just makes your life so much easier from a response standpoint.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And the point of my questioning is to kind of get people who are in enterprises today providing security to get on board with some of this automation and orchestration, as I think it is a relatively new and emerging category that we really need to help people overcome some of their fears, uncertainty, and doubt, that it can help them in their jobs today and provide the response, like you said, Brendan. So, Brendan, what if I have ServiceNow today and my security team has been insulated from some of the benefits? What can you say to those security people that will help them in their jobs to be able to integrate some of these features in ServiceNow?
What we want to do is we want to make InfoSec professionals better. And we want to do that by taking the mundane and the boring and the repetitive out of their day, automating those tasks and freeing them up to do the really challenging work. I don't know a single professional in InfoSec that would say, I'm not busy. Everyone's busy. We've got so much to do. And if you pay attention to the news, the attacks are increasing, the sophistication is increasing, and we're also seeing, old attacks that still work. We all have a ton to do. There's reports about the skill shortage in cybersecurity and IT security. It's true. As a hiring manager, it's hard to find talented people. We can't graduate folks quickly enough. We can't train them quickly enough. I think that we need to continue, promoting the young folks and training young folks and focusing on education in cybersecurity. But that helps us years to come. It doesn't help us today. It doesn't help us in the immediate future. Automation makes your people better. Workflow and process for the repetitive and the stuff they know they're going to have to do frees them up to spend time on higher value work and more interesting problems. If all you're doing is responding to phishing and viruses, malware, patching, and that's what you do all day, you can only do that for so long before you kind of burn out or you want to move on to something else. Wouldn't it be great if we could take that out of people's day and free them up to do higher value work?
Brendan, where can people go to learn more about ServiceNow's enterprise security solutions?
Check out our website, ServiceNow.com, SecOps.
SecOps, ServiceNow.com/SecOps. And now, do you have demos or trials that are available for people?
Yeah, we have demos. We have videos on the website. And yeah, we have trials of ServiceNow, absolutely.
That's awesome. Are there any other product innovations that you're working on at ServiceNow that you want to share with our listeners today?
I mean, we're always cooking up something. One technology that I'm really excited about is in threat intelligence, and we have this product that we call Trusted Circles. And threat intel sharing is, always kind of a sensitive topic. I think most people have access to one or more threat intel feeds, and CISOs talk to one another. But a lot of times companies don't want to come forward and say, hey, we were breached. Here's what happened. Here's how it happened. Here's all the data we have around it. With Trusted Circles, you can be put into a small, trusted, and anonymous community of other companies that are in your vertical, say, healthcare or data sciences, high tech, and share intel anonymously with one another. So you can have an alert, malware, a new type of attack, a new IOC, an IP that seems to be probing you, and you can push that into the circle. And other members of the circle can receive that information and say, hey, another customer, we're not going to tell you who it is, but another customer in the healthcare space is seeing this. Are you seeing it too? And once you get multiple members of that circle corroborating it, it's going to raise the alert to everyone else who's a member of that circle and say, hey, you guys all need to look at this alert because we just had 3 different customers in this circle report this is real. And here's how you need to look for it in your environment. So that idea of curated but open threat intel sharing and knowing that you're dealing with other enterprise security teams and that they're anonymously sharing intel, something we're really excited about.
John, comments, questions? I know threat intelligence is a hot button topic for you.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the hot button topic of threat intelligence feeds at the moment, but got other things we can do. But no, thank you very much for coming on the show. I do agree with a lot of the stuff as far as visibility is key. The ability to quickly react, the ability to correlate across multiple different endpoints and share that information quickly across a lot of people is absolutely essential.
Brendan, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. It was great, guys.
And with that, we'll take a short break. Come back. John Morin, you're up next.